What if I told you my neighbor had a secret room hidden inside their house, a room the HOA swore didn't exist? At first, it sounded like one of those neighborhood rumors, but one night I heard noises coming from inside, metallic clanging, the low hum of machines, and shadows moving across the window when no one was supposed to be home. I thought it was nothing until I found out the HOA had actually sealed part of the records, almost as if they were hiding something. That's when I realized this wasn't just a room, it was a secret, and the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. What I discovered behind that locked door left me speechless. I live in a suburban neighborhood called Oak Ridge Estates. From the outside, it looks picture perfect. Manicured lawns, kids riding bikes, neighbors waving from their driveways. But behind every white picket fence, there are stories, whispers, and secrets. One house, in particular, always caught my eye. It wasn't run down, it wasn't flashy, just ordinary. Too ordinary. But neighbors talked. They said inside that house was a room, a hidden room, that nobody had ever been allowed to see. At first, I laughed it off. I mean, who hides a room in their own house? But the more I heard, the more I noticed little details myself. Deliveries at odd hours, curtains always drawn tight, a window that seemed to belong to nothing. And then came the moment that changed everything. I overheard Margaret, the head of the HOA, warning another resident not to ask questions about the room. That's when I knew there was more to this story than anyone wanted to admit. The problem was simple. How do you investigate something that no one will talk about? The HOA was like a brick wall. Every time someone mentioned the room, the board members got defensive. It's just a basement. It's nothing important. Focus on your own house. But I couldn't let it go. I started digging through HOA meeting notes, vague references to restricted areas and community compliance storage, but nothing concrete. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones. One said they'd heard loud thuds at night. Another claimed they'd seen men in uniforms hauling boxes through the side entrance. A third swore that years ago, someone else tried to investigate and suddenly moved away without explanation. The challenge wasn't just uncovering the room, it was breaking through a wall of silence. The more questions I asked, the colder the stares became. I wasn't just facing curiosity anymore, I was facing resistance. And resistance meant there was something worth hiding. I decided to investigate, step by step. First, I walked past the house at different times of day. In the mornings, nothing unusual, but late at night, that's when things got strange. A faint glow from the cracks in the blinds, the unmistakable hum of machines, like industrial fans or power tools. I took notes. Times, sounds, even shadows. I could make out movement that didn't match someone simply living their life. Next, I tried documents, HOA bylaws, property records, building permits. That's when I found something odd. Years ago, a construction permit had been filed for the house, but the project was marked as confidential. A sealed room, reinforced walls, and something listed as environmental containment. Containment? For what? Then came the deliveries. I saw vans with no logos dropping off identical brown crates. The delivery men never lingered. They wheeled the boxes straight inside through a side entrance that no one else ever used. I asked a delivery driver once, half jokingly, "What's in the box?" He froze, then muttered, "Property of HOA." I laughed, but he didn't. He just shut the door and drove off. I wasn't alone in my suspicions. A few neighbors admitted they'd seen odd things too. Flickering lights, loud bangs, even one who claimed to hear voices chanting late at night. Sarah, my wife, thought I was going too far. She said, "It's probably just storage.
You're making this bigger than it is. But my gut told me otherwise. The final clue came from a contractor I tracked down who had worked on renovations years back. When I asked him about the house, he shook his head and went pale. "I can't talk about it. Just don't go inside." That's when I knew. This wasn't just a curiosity anymore. It was a mystery, one that was hiding right in plain sight.
The breakthrough came on a gray afternoon, the kind of day where the whole neighborhood felt hushed. Clouds pressed low, shadows stretched long, and the hum of cicadas made the silence more noticeable. I was walking past when I noticed something unusual. The side door to Margaret's house wasn't just open, it was propped with a crate. 2 delivery workers wheeled in another heavy box, sweat glistening on their foreheads. My pulse quickened. This was my window. I waited until they disappeared inside. Then, careful not to be seen, I slipped closer. Every step felt like thunder in my ears. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over record. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I wasn't in a normal house. The air was heavy, metallic, and unnervingly cold, not like a basement draft, but more like walking into a server room. The walls weren't painted plaster, they were steel, lined with insulation and bolts. This wasn't home construction, it was industrial. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into the dimly lit room, each tagged with stamped labels, HOA Confidential. My hand trembled as I pulled one drawer open. Inside were folders, each marked with the names of people I knew, neighbors, families. I pulled one out. Miller, Daniel. My stomach dropped. The file wasn't just a few pages. It was thick. Inside were photographs of my house, my car, even me mowing the lawn. Notes about my so-called infractions. Copies of fines I'd never even received. I flipped to the next folder. My neighbor's name. Same thing. Photos, complaints, legal drafts. This wasn't an accident. This was a system. And then I saw the crates stacked in the corner. Unlike the cabinets, these weren't labeled with names. They were labeled with dates. Curious, I pried one open. Inside were pre-written violation notices, all signed, all stamped, ready to be delivered in the future. I froze. They weren't just documenting the past, they were planning the future, punishing residents before they'd even done anything. Suddenly, I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoing against the steel walls. I turned. Margaret stood there, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing like a predator that had caught its prey. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. For a second, my legs wouldn't move. My brain screamed, "Run," but my body felt frozen in place. Then instinct took over. I bolted, past the cabinets, past the crates, shoving the door open so hard it banged against the wall. I didn't stop running until I was back in my house, door locked, chest heaving. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like someone coming for me. But one thing was certain. I couldn't stay silent.
The fallout began almost immediately. At the next HOA meeting, the community center was packed. Dozens of neighbors filled the chairs, some standing along the walls. Everyone had heard the whispers, and everyone wanted answers. Margaret sat at the front, gavel in hand, her smug expression daring anyone to challenge her. The agenda was written in bold: authorization of legal action against Daniel Miller. I stood when my name was called, folder of evidence in my hand. My voice was steady, but inside, my heart hammered. "Before you vote," I said, "you all need to see this." One by one, I laid out the evidence. Photos I'd taken inside the hidden room, copies of the files showing residents' names, the pre-written fines stamped with dates that hadn't even happened yet. The room buzzed with whispers, heads turned, faces went pale. Margaret slammed the gavel. These are fabricated lies. He broke into private property. But I cut her off. They're not lies. They're your system. You've been tracking us, finding us, planning punishments before anyone even violated a rule. I pulled out my trump card, a written statement from an attorney. It confirmed that parking spots, fines, and secret surveillance all fell outside legal HOA authority. If it continued, the HOA board could be sued personally. For the first time, Margaret's face faltered. And then the spark that lit the fire. From the back of the room, a neighbor stood. "He's telling the truth. I've seen that room too." Gasps rippled. Another neighbor stood, then another. Soon, voices erupted across the room. People who'd been bullied, fined unfairly, or silenced. Margaret banged the gavel again, but no one listened. Her power had cracked. The board members, usually silent under her glare, shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered to each other. Others avoided her eyes entirely. Finally, one spoke. "Maybe it's time we reviewed leadership." That was the moment it all unraveled. In the weeks that followed, Oak Ridge Estates felt transformed. The fines against me were rescinded, the hidden files were collected and destroyed, and neighbors who once avoided eye contact now came to my door to thank me. "You stood up for all of us," one man said, his voice shaking. At the next election, Margaret ran again, but this time she wasn't unopposed. 3 new candidates, backed by the community, stepped forward. When the ballots were counted, Margaret's name sank to the bottom. She was out. The HOA board was reshaped almost overnight. Meetings became open, transparent. Rules were enforced fairly, not as weapons. And for the first time in months, peace returned. I could park in my spot without fear. My wife Sarah smiled again when she watered her flowers. Even the neighbors, once divided, now chatted openly. But the story didn't end there. Someone had recorded the explosive meeting and leaked it online. Within days, the video racked up thousands of views. Strangers from across the country flooded the comments. That HOA Karen got destroyed. This is why I'll never live in an HOA community. Daniel is a legend. My fight had gone viral. What started as a neighborhood dispute had become a story people everywhere could relate to. It wasn't just about a secret room anymore. It was about abuse of power and what happens when ordinary people refuse to back down.
Sometimes I walk past Margaret's old house. The side door is locked now, the steel room emptied. But I'll never forget stepping inside. The chill of the air, the rows of cabinets filled with secrets, the sight of my own name on a file I was never meant to see. It taught me something bigger than HOA politics. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Truth has a way of clawing its way into the light. And sometimes, the most ordinary-looking house can hide the darkest stories. One evening, as Sarah and I parked in our driveway, she nudged me with a smile. All this over a secret room. I laughed, shaking my head. Not just a room, our right to know what was hidden inside. That was the real victory.
So what about you? Have you ever discovered something in your neighborhood you weren't supposed to see? A secret room? A hidden document? Maybe even an HOA cover-up? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because the next story might just make you look at your neighbors a little differently.